One question I think I'll have for Bruce is how you capture wildlife with your smartphone because it moves so quickly. I just haven't been able to take pictures of like birds or deer or anything because it just moves so quickly. I'm just curious to know how he does that.
Me? Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep, we can.
You can, okay, good. Hi,
Hi.
this is
Hi.
Brian and
Yep.
Kristen, I know, Tony, Ann's microphone is off, is that right?
Yeah, we've muted folks for the most part so that we don't get too much feedback.
Oh, okay, okay. So what am I going to see on the screen here when this starts? Am I going to be seeing the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now you'll see all the people, and then a little bit when most of the folks are in the session, then we'll start and we'll share the slides and then you'll see them.
Okay, sounds good.
Bruce, you figured out how to put a background on.
I did. It took me a while. I had to download a green screen and then I put the Black Hills up there. I was going to put one from the Lost 40 up north, but all the trees were growing right out of my head, and I thought, no, as a photographer, trees should not grow out of a person's head. So this is a Badlands, or no, somewhere out in the Dakotas. I don't remember where. But
You were not actually in South Dakota right now, is what you're saying.
no, this not. I'm not in South Dakota. I'm not in the Black Hills. No, and they are kind of running right through the middle of my head. But I can also use this as a tool for rule of thirds. So I thought that would work.
Oh, clever.
Getting clever, yeah. Hey, thanks for those. Thanks for those links to the flowers.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Bruce emailed me outside of this. He was going to start doing planting for pollinators in his yard.
Yeah, and I was going to do. I've always done vegetables. It's just so much cheaper just to ride my bike down to the farmers markets and buy the stuff there. You know, I'm thinking that's a better way to do it. So. Oh, and I got my outside Minnesota shirt. Thanks to you guys.
Yeah, so there's a NPR staff on the call. They'll appreciate that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that was a good shoot. That was fun.
So we have 21 folks here and there's 36 registered. So we'll just wait a little bit. I know it's 5 o'clock, but we'll just give people a little bit chance to get settled in and get online.
Okay. And Kirsten, you just want me to tell you when to flip slides?
Yep, just give me a cue and I will advance the slides. Mm-hmm.
No! No, can't do it now. It'll be subtle.
I think I have the easiest job of anybody today.
Oh no, mine is very easy. This is, of course, I wrote all new notes for myself here this afternoon, so I can expand on some things a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. It'll be fun for us.
Yeah.
So we'll just give it a couple more minutes for people to join in. So. So Bruce, I just accidentally muted you, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. There we go. Now I'm just going to talk without saying anything.
Yeah, you can talk all you want, Bruce.
I'll just talk without saying anything. They'll still think I'm on mute.
Or you could stand perfectly still and we could think you froze.
That's right. That's right. And I still may get a visit from my cat. I don't know.
That's acceptable. In these times, it's always fun to see a pet pop into
Yeah, I don't know
one
where
of
he is
these.
right now. He now has a food allergy. That was what
Oh,
was happening with him.
I'm glad you figured it out.
Yeah.
So we'll just give it one more minute and we'll let people join us as it goes in, but we'll get started here at 5 after.
Sure.
There you go. As I said it, the clock turned to 5 after. So I'll start with a little spiel about Great River Greening. So I'm Meredith St. Pierre. You guys all got emails from me. I'm the gift officer for Great River Greening. And just to give you a little bit more background about Great River Greening, if you're not familiar with us, we started 25 years ago with a tree planting project in St. Paul along the Mississippi River with hundreds of volunteers helping to get the work done. And now we have worked with over 44,000 volunteers on over 400 sites all across Minnesota. Unfortunately, this spring, we had to make the difficult decision not to host any of our volunteer events. I had to look for new and unique ways to get our restoration work done without the support of 1,500 volunteers alongside us. So we've gotten creative and resourceful. We reworked some timelines and project plans with our site partners, and our conservation work has not halted. It's become an all hands on deck approach, which I appreciate as someone who's normally mostly in the office. I've been able to get out and help with invasive species management and plantings. In the month of May alone, our staff has seeded wild rice in Carlos Avery, pulled garlic mustard at Lebanon Hills and along the Minnehaha Creek, and planted trees in a new bigwood WMA outside Lonsdale, Minnesota, on top of prepping a number of other sites for spring plantings. So our mission to restore and conserve the land and water that enriches our lives continues, but we really look forward to getting back into the field with our volunteers by our side, and hopefully that can happen still this year when we begin our fall event series. So you can find all the information on what we're doing and how we're updating our work on our social media sites or our websites. So tonight you're participating in one of our Wonder-Hour events. This event series was designed to help people learn about our conservation work in the Twin Cities, and also to help people learn nature-based skills and knowledge that they can use in their own outdoor spaces. Tonight, we get to learn how to use the camera we all carry in our pockets to take great nature photography. So, Carson, if you want to start the slideshow, we'll get to Bruce. So Bruce, who is here sharing his talent with us tonight, is a native of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He earned his BS in radio and television and film at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. And then he went on to get a master's at Southern Illinois University. His work as a commercial photographer took him coast to coast and north to south. He specialized in food photography and was active in product, agriculture, and industrial photography. He has a lifelong love of photography, and we are so lucky he brought his talents to Great River Greening as a volunteer photographer a few years ago. I'll let you take it from here in just a second, Bruce, but a little like nuts and bolts of tonight. So this session will last for a little bit, as long as Bruce wants to talk to us. And then we want you guys to get outside and take pictures on your own. And then we would love it if you shared them with us so that we can have them and share them in an album we create on Facebook. And then if you have a question, go ahead and use the chat function, since we've muted you all to cut down on background noise. So from now, Bruce, I'll let you take the lead.
Great. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to start out. I'm going to try to explain a few of the really basic rules of photography, things that I've learned over the years. But the first rule is, once you learn all this other stuff and you practice it enough to get comfortable with it, you can always break those rules. Nothing is set in stone. So that's where I always say, the rule one is that those rules are made to be broken and to be more creative. There was a wonderful woman named B. Nettles who wrote a book called Breaking the Rules, was actually the name of the book. And it opened up my eyes. It was just really great. You know, don't always be so locked into because this is the way somebody told you to do it. So next is smartphones. They've come a long way. Extraordinary pieces of equipment. You know, we all carry them in our pockets. And I like the fact now that you can change the focus and you can change exposures if you can afford those phones, which I cannot, but they're really pricey. First thing in any photography discussion should be keep your equipment clean. And in this case, the little lens on the back of your camera, it's got a really hard piece of glass on the top of it. But I always, you know, I may use my t-shirt. A lot of times before I go out, I'll just use like what you would use to clean your eyeglasses with, just to wipe them off, just so it doesn't get dirty. Dirt obviously is going to affect focus. It's going to affect sharpness. It's just not going to have you create the best photograph that you can with that phone. So those are the really basic things here. Next slide. Okay, so the rule of thirds. If you can see that behind me, the photograph that was shot in the Black Hills a few years ago, and not with my phone. That was shot with a large format 35 millimeter kind of camera. If you look at that photo, I don't know if I can, well, anyhow, so look at the foreground, and then look at the hills, and then look at the sky. It essentially divides that frame into three parts, the rule of thirds. You can use the rule of thirds horizontally, like this shot is. You can use it vertically, and it's just a way to help you frame. And the composition is really important. You know, if you want a good photograph, how does the composition look? You know, where is your subject matter placed and all that kind of thing. So on most phones, and I can only speak because I only shoot with iPhones, in the settings under camera, there's something called grid, and you can turn it on and off. And that gives you 9 little squares on the back of your camera. And you can use those either in, I know there's square and rectangle formats, I think is how iPhone describes them. But essentially what it does, it helps you line things up. It can help you not only as far as compositionally, but if you're looking at horizon lines, it gives you a little bit better, you know, so you're not shooting things at a 45-degree angle. It just kind of line up with the lines. And you want to compose within those. I like shooting things off center oftentimes, so that it might be in the right third of the screen, it might be in the top right corner, it might be in the bottom right, but it's just a way to help you compose a photograph. It's something that I don't use because I've been doing this for so long that it's just things, I see things in a certain way and I can just compose them. But if you're really new to this and you want to practice composition, this is a really good tool to use. And I would assume that these are on Android phones as well. I find them personally, I find them a little annoying, but you know, they're there for you to use. It's a tool, it's a great teaching tool. And once you get used to using those as composition or for composition, you can kind of get rid of them. And I would think that you could use or Google something like rule of thirds photography and get a better, more in-depth explanation and maybe, you know, a number of more image samples. So can I have the next slide, please? So light is nothing. I mean, light is just what we see every day. You know, it's light, it's reflection and shadows. It's all it is. And that's what film photography always captured on the acetate bases and the you know, the layers of emulsion. And now we do that in the cell phone, and it's just all done digitally. The best light, for my opinion, we used to call it, some people, what I used to call it sweet light. Some people call it warm light or something like that. But anyhow, it's the early morning and early evening hours when that light is really soft and warm, it's really beautiful. It's my favorite time to shoot. The other favorite time is overcast days like we have today, because it really flattens things out. You don't have to worry about real bright highlights and real dark shadows. It gives you a much smoother, less contrasty. If you want to build the contrast, we'll talk about that later with some apps that you can use to do that. I really like overall overcast days. I mean, those are probably my favorite times to shoot, just because you can shoot morning, noon, or night, and it's nice and even. Generally, people will shoot with the light coming from the back, which is really good unless you're shooting a group of people and having them face into the light and their eyes are all closed. So then you kind of, work it around so that you're not, if you're photographing people outside, that they're not facing directly into the light. You don't want their squinty eyes. But it's lighting from the back, just, it takes care of any kind of lens reflections and flares and stuff that you might get. However, this is breaking those rules. You can shoot, I like shooting into the sun or getting the sun just in the upper corner of a photo or something that gets those nice light streaks coming down, kind of a flare almost. And it really adds a lot to a photo, I think. You try it out, see if you like it. I would never shoot directly into the sun. Don't look directly into the sun. Don't hold your camera up there for any camera for a long time, because it can damage the inside. Going through the lens and focusing light onto the inside of the camera is not a good thing. Backlighting is really nice. Backlighting and side lighting both. It creates nice textures. If you've taken time to look at my Instagram page, you'll see a lot of shots with texture involved in them, and it's just a good way to create tactile feeling almost to your photograph. It's just something that I really like to do, especially and a lot of that comes from my work in food. If you've ever looked at food photographs, most of those have, it's called a rim light. You'll see like a little highlight going across the top of food. You might have some nice reflections on the top of it. Generally, they're backlit, either directly backlit or backlit from a 45-degree angle. And it really makes it appetizing for food work. And that you can carry over into any kind of photograph. It gives more dimensionality to the subject. Next slide, thanks. Okay, HDR, high dynamic range. Essentially what I said there, more detail in the shadows and highlights. What HDR does, it's, how do I explain this? Okay, essentially it takes 3 photos at one time. The one exposed just for overall, one exposes more for highlights, and one exposes more for shadows. And then inside your camera, the computer, the phone, merges all that together, and it gives you the highest quality image for shadow to highlight ratios. So it's giving you more of what you see. And you may have taken the pictures, say you're inside a cabin someplace, and there's like a picnic table inside that you eat at, and there's a nice window light coming in from the side. And when you see it, you can see the detail underneath the table. You can see detail coming in through the windows. And that's what, if you shoot it in the HDR setting, you're going to start seeing more of that detail, much as you would with your own eye. I shoot everything in HDR on my cell phone. On my regular cameras, not so much. But it's a really great way. I mean, that's all. It's a high dynamic range, nothing more than the ratio between highlights and density, or highlights and shadow. And this combines all that, makes for great photos. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about apps. And then shooting in a burst mode, I seldom do that. I do that by mistake. I hold it down too long and I get like 3 million pictures of the same thing, and all, I throw them out. My son uses burst mode with his kids an awful lot on his what kind of phone does he have? Android, on his Android phone. And they are just beautiful. I mean, you can stop action, you can get, it's just wonderful. I just don't have a lot of use for it, but it's, burst mode is really nice. We get the next slide. Okay, this one is really important. I started messing with photography in 9th grade, and by the time I got to high school, I thought I knew everything and blah, blah, blah. First thing out was a guy said, never shoot from up high, always get down low and shoot. And he's true, it's right. Change your angle of view, like this one on the right is a shot that I did on the last Wonder Hour last year. Looking up, I got way down in the grass and looked up at the sky. It's just a different point of view. It just makes things more interesting. You don't always have to shoot, don't hold your, way up here, get down lower. It just makes it more exciting. And don't be afraid to look down on the ground and see what's down in front of you. There might be something really interesting down there. You may see insects crawling around. You may see a tiny little flower pod that's bursting open. It's just not good to always look forward. When I'm out in the woods, I'm looking up in the trees a lot of time just because I like to see all the branches and the patterns that branches make. I think that's really, to me, that's really exciting stuff. Not everything is straight in front of you. So don't be afraid to, look around. Always, well, not always. I'm a big details guy, and I've, like many of us during this stay-at-home thing, I'm going to clean my basement. So I went down there and I started pulling out photographs that I did when I was probably 12 years old and had my own little darkroom set up. And I watched myself progress from there all the way through, well, just till a couple of years ago. And I've always been detail oriented. And I like working close up on things. I like to see things close up. Again, the textures that you can get, and nature is just beautiful. Nature has, think of a petal on a flower, and it's got little ridges in it on the top, and it's got a little pollen drifting in on some part of it. There's just so much you can see. I also like shooting reflections in puddles, as long as I don't get myself in them. I think that's a really interesting thing to do. And not just calm puddles, but puddles that'll be rippling, fall leaves from the trees above, rippling on like a windblown puddle. Great things. Work close, get intimate, see your subjects close up, show people things that they don't see, make your photos interesting. It's all about practicing and doing this over and over again and finding your own, what art directors and agencies used to call, what's your style? It's just kind of working up and finding out what makes you happy. You may be really interested. I follow on Facebook a thing called Birds of Wisconsin. And there are people out there that just knock my socks off. They've got these pictures of birds. If that's what you're interested in, they're glorious. They're just wonderful things. If you're interested in big landscapes, practice doing landscapes. And landscapes don't have to be the mountain range that's sitting behind me. Landscapes can be buildings downtown. They can be cityscapes. Just think, how can you apply what you're interested in and make it different from what other people are doing? Don't be locked into boxes, essentially. Can I get the next slide, please? When you're working close up, focus becomes an issue. I was just shooting some stuff yesterday, and I'll be darned if I could get what I wanted in focus. I just couldn't do it. So watch that. What I'll see oftentimes, somebody will be shooting a flower and they get just a little bit too close so that the stamens of the flower are out of focus, and that's what they wanted to see. But the bottom of the flower bowl is sharp. You got to be really, just be aware of that. Sometimes that can work to your advantage. I don't mind having things in my frame that are really close to me, that are out of focus, and that help create depth when you look at the subject matter behind it. I do that frequently with trees, with groups of trees. I like to shoot that way, where something in front of me is soft, but the stuff behind me is sharp. And some people refer to this in my business, it would be called selective focus. And you're just trying to focus the person's eye, the viewer's eye, on what you want them to see. I also like leading lines, and I'll show you a picture that incorporates some of these things. Leading lines, I always think, because we're talking about outdoor things, would be if you're walking on a trail, maybe have that trail coming in from the bottom of the corner and then kind of going up and across, just to lead, you know, it makes it a little more interesting instead of just shooting it straight on. It gives the idea to the viewer that here's the trail and over to the right is this beautiful bunch of wooded area that you're seeing, or maybe it's a field of flowers or something, but it's taking them on that walk with you. And leading lines can be railroad tracks, they can be railings on in a park, you know, the park trail or something. I go up to the Coon Rapids Dam frequently, walk across the dam. There's big leading lines that you can find there. It's there to direct the viewer to what you want them to see. It's making your photo more dynamic. It's giving, you're giving the viewer a point of focus to look at. It's what you're seeing and how you're seeing it. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the last wonder hour, and this was just erosion that had happened on the trail. I think it was kind of sandy. The one on the left is the original, and the one on the right is one that I manipulated in something called Snapseed and made it into a black and white. So, and I also like working in squares. I don't know why I like working square, but I do. It might be from shooting square format film for a number of years. I don't really know. It's my preference. And it doesn't work well for landscapes. You know, landscapes, nice, long, drawn out. My landscapes are usually cropped at, I think they're 8 by 30 inches. So they're long and horizontal, narrow prints. But soon you're going to learn how to see. And it doesn't matter, again, what format, if you're square or if you're rectangle, if you're looking at landscapes, if you're looking at details, flowers, birds, it doesn't matter. The more you apply yourself to it, the more it gets annoying to a point. You're walking down the street and go, oh, I'd like to shoot that because it's really cool, you know? And you just start to see things all over the place all the time. And I don't know, I just like it. So the rule of thirds here doesn't really apply. I mean, I'm looking at it, I get a rule of halves almost. You know, you get the busyness down at the bottom and then the smoothness up at the top. Again, you don't have to always follow the rules. But here again, considering that side light, that lower in the afternoon light, it's giving you a lot more texture. You can see even how it really accentuates it in the black and white. So, you know, the more you work, the better you're going to get. Could we get the next slide? Okay. People, purists, as I call them, you know, what they shoot is what they end up with, and that's what they like. When I look at things, I predetermine what I want it to look like. And after doing this for many years, I can easily come and do that in my mind. But every photograph that I take, every one is touched by Snapseed. Without, it just always happens. Snapseed is free, which is great. It's almost like having a mini Photoshop on your phone. You can change exposures, you can change, you can enhance your HDR. You can use, I should get my phone out here and tell you. If you've never seen it, it's a wonderful app. So it'll take just a second. Okay, so you can go in part that's called Tune Your Image. You can do brightness, contrast, saturation, ambience, highlights, shadows, warmth. They then have things where you can go in and selectively lighten and darken areas. You can add softness and focus differences. They have vintage settings, drama, HDR, all kinds of things. And there are great YouTube videos talking about Snapseed. It is by far, I recommend this to everybody. It's just a way to clean up and snap your photos a little bit more. I really, really like Snapseed. Nexters, formulas, and distressed FX are all apps that layer filters over your photographs. And some of them will only layer one, some layer several, you're able to layer several of them at a time. They're good apps. I don't use them all that often, but there are some times that they really work nicely to enhance the photograph. A couple of other ones that I use. One that I think is kind of fun is called Tintype, and it takes you back and it kind of makes photographs that look like old-fashioned tintypes. Again, just kind of something to mess around with, but they work pretty fun when you're out there shooting people, or you're out shooting trees. I like them on trees. I like them on building settings or architectural kinds of things. And another one called Hipstamatic. Hipstamatic is an app that you buy, and then within that app, you can make purchases of camera lenses. They got a whole series of different kinds of camera lenses you can buy, and a whole different kind of series of films, and you match them up. And I have one, I don't use it very often, but I shoot it, when I shoot it black and white, I use the Hipstamatic, and I have a particular lens and film combination that I use. Once you shoot it, you can always take it into Snapseed and do some more, some cleaning up if you want to. But I highly recommend using Snapseed. It's a great, take your time to learn how to use it. It's got so much depth to it. It's an amazing app. Is there a next slide? Yeah, next slide, yeah. So here we're talking about this photograph, the one on the left, well, it's on my left. I don't know if it's on your left. The darker one is right out of the phone. The one on the right is out of the phone using Snapseed. So you can really see the difference. And we also have leading lines. We have that railing drawing into the picture. You kind of have rule of thirds where you have the field of flowers, you have the tree line with the building and the sky above. So what I did, what I can remember, this was done last summer. So I lightened the tree line in Snapseed using the selective device. I lightened the foreground using selective tool. And then I enhanced the foreground and the trees using a saturation setting. The sky was done, that's done with, doggone, I can't, it's another setting. That's done with something called a drama setting that enhanced the sky. So that's what Snapseed can do. I mean, it's just an amazing little tool. I love it. And to me, the one on the right looks more dynamic than the one on the left. The darker versus the light. I like the lighter better. My cat is making a lot of noise here in the background. So
it adds to things, Bruce.
Yeah,
it's good.
Now he's standing next to me, so he may be on my lap in a minute. Is there another slide? There should be one more slide in here. Yes. So I've recently become interested in these auxiliary lenses that you can buy for your phone cameras. And they're pricey. Some of them up to the $300. Usually that's like a set of lenses. But typically they're telephoto, wide angle, or macro, or fisheye. And I've really been toying with the idea of getting a wide angle lens. Wide angle lenses, a lot of newspaper photographers, when they're working inside of crowded areas, and they're shooting with a wide angle. I shoot, when I'm shooting for Great River, a lot of time, in fact, I'd say 95% of my photos are shot with a wide angle lens. It just gets you more intimate with your subject matter if you're photographing people, and I really like that. And I've been toying with that for a while. For about $100, you can get a really decent one. Macro lens is the same things, but if you're using a macro lens, again, in the macro, we're talking really close up. And so you got to hold it really steady so that you don't lose your plane of focus, where your focus point is. I would suggest if you're going to get involved with a macro lens, try it out hand-holding and see how it goes. I would imagine that there is some kind of a camera, I don't know what you would call it, a camera adapter or something, or a phone adapter that you could mount it onto a tripod to shoot, just to hold it really steady and maintain that particular field of focus or the area that you want it focused on. Tom's Guide I like Tom's Guide just to get basic background information. And these guys, they cover the gamut on lenses. And I was looking at the smartphone lenses recently on Tom's Guide, and that's where I'm kind of getting some of this information from. But I would highly recommend Tom's Guide if you have questions or interest in it. And then, you know, you can buy them. I would assume you can buy them out at, now I can't think of the name of the camera store out in Golden Valley. Anyhow, that one or West Photo.
National Camera.
National, yeah. National or West Photo, I would assume has them. I also buy from Adorama out of New York. And there's one other one out of New York that I use once in a while. But really, you know, I would support local businesses at this time for sure. So I think that ends up what I have. It's just a really basic overview. And what you have to do is you have to go out and shoot. You have to get outside and do this. You can do it inside. I mean, I just set up one of, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, had a piece of white paper and I had some oil cans that were my grandfather's. And that'll be going up on my Instagram page in a few days. But then I just ran that through Snapseed and a couple other filters from some of the other distressed FX and things. And it's really a beautiful shot. And then I made it into a brown toned image and it's really pretty. So you can shoot all this stuff inside, but getting outside and walking around is a good thing to do. So, yeah, any questions, anybody?
We have a couple, and if you have another one, drop it into the chat function and I will share it with Bruce. So the first question comes from Anne, and she says she has trouble getting her phone to focus when she's shooting close up.
Yes.
In other words, automatic focus takes over. Do you have any suggestions for her?
You generally have to back up. You have to, that's what I ran into yesterday when I was trying to photograph this black and white thing that I was trying to shoot. And I wanted to get really close to get the detail. I just had to back up and then eventually I'll crop into that image in Snapseed. But there's nothing you can do. I mean, that's the way those cameras are set up. It's so much different than a manual lens on a 35 where you can really fine tune that focus. And I think the iPhone 11 might allow you to do a little bit of that, but I'm not sure. And there may also be, and this one I'm shooting out, I'm not positive of this one, but I thought I saw some places that there are some apps out there that will let you manually control focus to a point, but you'd really have to look at that. Basically, the basic to answer to your question is you're just going to have to back up when you're shooting really close because cameras will always do that. I mean, that's just the way they're made.
Okay. And then Susan has a question do you find Snapseed more effective than the editing functions within the iPhone itself using their app, that setting?
Absolutely.
For brightness? Okay.
Absolutely. Much, much deeper. I mean, I use the iPhone stuff on occasion, but this is just, I mean, there's a learning curve to it. It does a lot of the same things that the iPhone does, but it does a lot more than the iPhone does. It's just an amazing, I mean, you know, if anything, go on YouTube and look up Snapseed tutorials and see all the kinds of things that it can do. I mean, it's free, so it doesn't cost you anything to download it. You don't get hit up with lots of buy this, buy that kind of thing. There's nothing like that on that app. It's just a really solid, well-designed, and easy to use once you get used to it. I usually step through, when I'm working on Snapseed, the first thing I'll do is I'll go into white balance, and in white balance you can control the temperature, the color temperature, or the color tint, or there's a setting on there called AW, automatic white balance, and I usually almost always go to automatic white balance, and I do that. The next tool I will use is curves. And 99.9% of the time, I'll put a soft contrast curve on my image. Then I'll go over to details. And details is kind of like a, how do I explain it? I don't know if I can explain this real well. Say if you think of a picture of a tree. In details, you have two settings. You have structure and you have sharpening. So structure, when you use the slider on structure, that's going to bring like the big branches on the tree. It's going to touch those a little bit and sharpen them up a little bit. And then sharpening that works on more of the details, like the leaves on the tree. You don't want to overdo either one of those. They're really, if you go way too far, you'll end up seeing it in your photo. But you can always get rid of them too. There's a function on every setting that if you don't like it, you can just undo it. The next tool I'll use is called Tune Image. And in Tune Image, I might add some brightness or saturation or something called ambiance that it kind of opens up the shadows a little bit. And then I may go on and use their HDR tool. Again, well, sometimes. I just did one yesterday, way overcorrected, but it makes the photo look really different, so I like that. But HDR, you kind of have to be careful, and you'll definitely see the differences when you move the sliders. And I almost always go down to the bottom and use a vignette that just puts a little darkness around the edges of the photos. It's just a great tool to use. And sometimes I'll use lens blur that gives softness in different areas. You can move it around and make different areas of your image softer. Occasionally I'll use a noir, the N-O-I-R, I don't know how you pronounce it, but I like some of the filters in there. The only one that I really never use is called grunge, just because it's really uncontrollable. I can't figure out why it's even in there, but it's really good. So, any other questions?
Yeah, follow up on that. So you're giving us all the love for Snapseed and using the app on your phone. What's the difference between using that and then if you have the software going into Photoshop or something similar, if you were like download your photo to a computer and then edit there? Yeah,
well, this is just in my hand and I can sit on my couch, watch TV and do this kind of, I do take, well, for everything, 99% of what I shoot with my phone just goes onto my Instagram page, and that is all just iPhone photography. I very seldom take any of these images into Photoshop and do anything with them. In Photoshop, like the shot that's behind me, that was Photoshopped, where I layered things in and brightened areas and darkened areas and added saturation and all that kind of thing. It's basically the same thing, but it's free. And I can do it on my phone.
Yeah. It's Photoshop in your pocket.
Exactly. And I think in Photoshop is much more nuanced and is a much, much bigger program than this one is. But for 90% of what I shoot on here, absolutely fine. No problem. I do love Photoshop. I use Photoshop a lot. So everything that I shoot for Great River Greening goes through Photoshop.
Okay, and then if you do use the apps to edit the original image, could you still print it if you wanted to print it and frame it or hang it up somewhere?
Absolutely.
Or does it doesn't alter the quality too much?
No. Well, again, especially on that details tool, you don't want to go like overboard, because when you print it, I mean, if you're printing it on your home printer, fine, you can always go back and take it down. And on any of these, so when with the details, you just want to be really careful, because it really over processes the image and it makes it look fake. So you want to just, I might go 9 or 10 on the slider at most on any one of those. And any image, when you get done with doing all the corrections or whatever you want to do to that image, you'll hit the export button and it gives you two options. It gives you save or save as copy. And I always save as copy. So I always have the original left and I have the one that I just did that I liked all the manipulation on. And if you do something in the app and you're not liking it, on the top right-hand side, there's it looks like a little stack of paper with an arrow, and you just touch that and up comes a menu that says undo, redo, or revert. And if you hit revert, it goes right back to the original image. If you just do undo, it'll undo the steps that you have done in succession, and just the way you did them. It's a really wonderful, yeah, in fact, I have, I don't know, 5 or 6 of my photos hanging out in New York from my cell phone that my nephew and his wife wanted up in their house, and they all came from the cell phone. Yeah, they're great. I mean, cell phones are limited in size. You can't make like mural-sized prints out of cell phones and then expect them to hold together. But they're good for like 8x10, or I do a lot of 8x8 prints. I like that format. So.
Great, thank you. And then one question, and Kirsten had this question before we started, but we talked about flowers and landscapes, but she had a question: how do you take a picture of an animal, because they don't hold still?
They
Same
do
with
not
like
hold
you've
still.
got, yeah,
You've
gotten some good pictures of pollinators too, so what are your tips for that?
Well, okay, the pollinator pictures are pictures with my Canon 5D Mark III with different lenses and stuff. Pictures of animals. First, patience, lots and lots and lots of patience. I mean, you may have to sit in a blind or something. I really don't know. I've never tried really shooting them with a cell phone, outside of my cat, who just, he just walks away as soon as I take the camera out. He's just being a cat. I couldn't tell you. I'm stumped. I mean,
all right.
Well, when you think about, when I think of animal pictures, I immediately go to geographic photographers, or no, I can't. The guy that did White Wolf, and he's a Minnesota photographer. He did one shot a day for a year. He only exposed one frame. You know who I'm talking about? And
I do. I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, so am I.
I have some of his work in my home too.
It's the most.
Brandenburg. Thank you.
Yes.
I even thought of it.
That Chasing the Light. Brandenburg, Chasing the Light. Awesome book. Everybody check it out from the library if nothing else. It's great.
Yeah.
But those guys, they're all shooting with high-end cameras, long lenses and stuff, and maybe with a telephoto lens, the auxiliary lenses, the extra lenses that you can put on your cell phones, maybe with something like that, you could do nature photography or animal, bird, and that kind of thing. But I don't think cell phones are really made for that. Go to the zoo and try it out, see what you get at the zoo. There's a lot of people, and it kind of bugs me a little bit, but there's a lot of people that go out to the zoos and photograph animals. They're beautiful photographs, and they're not passing them off as being, I was out in, Timbuktu photographing tigers. They tell you I shot this at the zoo, and they're really nice and they're cropped nicely, and I just don't think that's really like nature animal photography.
Good practice, though.
Good practice, though. Very good practice. Yeah.
So we have one more.
I'm incredibly impressed in Minnesota, the number of extraordinarily good photographers. Just, it knocks my socks off. I always thought I was good, and I'm put to shame by these guys. I mean, they are just awesome.
Well, we appreciate that you share your talents with us. So you're number one in the Great River Grading.
Everybody should go volunteer at least once with you guys. They're a great organization, super friendly people. They feed you. They have coffee early in the morning. It's all the important stuff, It's they're just great folks to work with.
So we have one more question.
Sure.
So can you think of any perspective settings or features you can point out for people that are going to be useful for a novice when you're going out to shoot? What makes iPhone photography better or equal to a regular camera, aside from purchasing the lenses you suggested?
Well, the convenience of it, it's just there in your pocket. You can do the same kind of image post-production image work that you can with a regular camera. The limitation would be the size of the prints that you can make compared to what I can make off of my, I can make bus poster size prints off of my camera. I could not do that with a 35 or with a cell phone. Give me that question again. I'm trying to.
Can you think of perspective or settings or features that will be useful for a novice when going out to shoot? And then
when you say perspective settings, that means two different things to me. That means
Well, yeah,
the place
perspective
where you are,
yeah, it
the
is
place
it's
where
a list. So,
okay,
oh, she
like
clarified. We have, so Amy said, besides tap the screen to focus, HDR, etc., can you identify the settings like using night, landscape, portrait that could simulate shallow, DOF, I'm not sure what that means, blurred background, or how to hold your depth of field, blurred background, how to
sure.
hold your camera.
Well, I always hold my camera with two hands, just because it helps to steady it. So, it's in front of my face like that. On occasion, if I'm shooting rectangle, I might do that. And that's the other thing. Don't be afraid to tip your camera if you're shooting in a rectangular format. Not everything has to be up and down. Ooh, where'd it go? There it is. Okay. As far as settings, these camera, with the exception, I think, of the iPhone 11, one of those models, that allows you to blur the background. And I'm not familiar at all with the Android phones, and they may have those same features on them, where you can blur the backgrounds out and bring that, so you kind of control that focus a little bit more. Otherwise, like this is I shoot with an iPhone 8, and that's just fixed. I mean, I can't, unless I'm working really close up where the black background will blur out. It's just, everything's going to be sharp. I mean, the apertures are just so small on these phones, then the sensitivity of the capture chip is so high that you don't need a lot of light to shoot with them. So for focusing, it's holding things steady. It's getting as close as you can, and you can see it on your screen. If what you're focusing on starts to look a little bit soft, like I said, just back up a little bit. Nighttime photography. I was coming out of Dangerous Man one night, and there was a really nice shot looking down the street, and I did of a neon sign, and it turned out really nice. But what happens a lot of times, at least on my camera, and again, this may be, I've seen these ads where they're talking about these cameras that are set for night viewing, for night shooting. But in my case, on the iPhone 8, when I shoot at night, there's a lot of digital noise where the pixels, it really pixelated. It breaks down into, and you can see all the yellow, red, and green dots and stuff. And that's just low light photography. That's just going to happen. On my camera, I can't control that. I can take it, if I took that photo, and then took it into my computer software, I have programs that I could downplay some of that noise, but there's no control to get rid of that noise on my iPhone. So for that, I really don't know if there's a solution for that noise problem in nighttime photography. Go with some of this. Am I answering that person's questions?
I think so.
Have they responded and said, you're an idiot, or
no,
that's the answer?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. So another question. She said, no, laugh aloud. No, thank you. She's an iPhone person too. She's a teacher of high schoolers and wanting to inspire students to use their iPhones in a way that's deeper.
Well, you should get her name, and
yeah.
If they want somebody to come out and talk to the class. I just did a class out at it was like an hour away from my house, but myself and a food stylist did a class out there, and I like doing that stuff. So if they're
all right, I'll make sure that we connect you guys afterwards.
If that's an interest to her, yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
So, and then another question came in. How do you manage the glare on your screen when you're trying to take a photo?
Cup my hand around it, and truly, some people carry a cloth with them. I used to, when I was shooting large format, like 4x5 and 8x10 inch film, and we'd be outside, you literally cover yourself up with a cloth so that it takes that background flare and the sky flare and stuff off of that screen. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just, it's the glass that's on the front of your camera, and it's just reflecting the sky. I don't know if you can see that. but I'll kind of cup my hand around it like this, you know, just like anybody else would, just kind of try to block that light and get close enough to it. And there's not, you know, you could take paper, you know, if you have some kind of where am I? There I am. If you had paper, do something like that and make anything to shield the reflection of the sky off of that glass. It's just inherent in the way the product is manufactured. So.
Thank you. I think that was our last question. So I listened to you do this talk last August, and I listened again, and I learned more new things.
Oh,
so I hope everyone will join us, go outside and take a picture.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what you should do? You should go to the regional parks that these guys work in. Amazing place. And there are so many little ones that we were out at one, it's in St. Louis Park, right off the freeway, big boardwalk that went through it.
Oh, Westwood Hills.
Holy moly, what a beautiful place. Never knew it existed. It's just wonderful. And the new one that's being built down south, I mean, that's not open yet, but that one is
No, it's not.
That's going to
Doyle
be
Kennebec. Yeah.
That's going to, oh, yeah. Go out and look at these parks because they're all over and they're great.
All right. Well, no one has jumped in with any more questions, so we will let you all get outside and take some pictures.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us tonight, and stay tuned for we'll have more Wonder Hour sessions, maybe more virtual like this in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you later.